Hi, this is the Dr. Deborah Show, and this is the show where we talk about bringing peace and calm into your life. Later on the show, we'll be talking about well-being and mental health. I'm a Santa Barbara-based clinical psychologist, and I specialize in pediatric neuropsychology. And during my clinical training and current work, I've treated thousands of people. And my experiences are vast, and I want to share this information with you. This show is all about our community and how to create compassionate conversations about our well-being and health. Again, I want to welcome our listeners to the Dr. Deborah Show. It's wonderful to have you with us. And as a reminder, this show is psychoeducational and is in the area of neuropsychology and well-being. It's not meant to replace professional mental health advice or therapy. So if you do believe you suffer from a particular disorder, please do reach out for professional help. Today on the show, we're talking about mental health and well-being with a focus on nonviolence with our very special guest, Arun Gandhi. Arun Gandhi was born in Durban, South Africa, and is the fifth grandson of India's legendary leader, Mohandas K. Mahatma Gandhi. Growing up under the discriminatory apartheid laws of South Africa, he was beaten by quote-unquote white South Africans for being too black and quote-unquote black South Africans for being too white. And Arun learned from his parents and grandparents that justice does not mean revenge. It means transforming the opponent through love and suffering. Arun's grandfather taught him to understand nonviolence through understanding violence. Gandhi said, if we know how much passive violence we perpetuate against one another, we will understand why there is so much physical violence plaguing societies and the world. Through daily lessons, Arun learned about violence and anger, and he shares these lessons all around the world. He has participated in the Renaissance Weekend deliberations with President Clinton and other well-respected Rhodes Scholars. He has spoken at the Chicago Children's Museum, the Women's Justice Center, the Young Presidents Organization in Mexico, the Trade Union Leaders Meeting in Italy, and the Peace and Justice Center in Missouri. And Arun's journeys also include speaking throughout the world in Croatia, France, Ireland, Holland, Lithuania, Nicaragua, China, Scotland, and Japan. He's very involved in social programs and writing. Shortly after Arun married his wife, Sunanda, they were informed the South African government would not allow her to accompany him there. And Sunanda and Arun decided to live in India and work there. He worked there for 30 years as a journalist for the Times of India. They also rescued over 125 orphan children from the streets and began a center for social change and started projects for the social and economic uplifting of the oppressed using the backbone of Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence. These programs changed the lives of more than 500,000 people in over 300 villages, and they still continue to grow. In 1987, they came to the U.S. and started the MK Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence at Christian Brothers University. In the 17 years of the Institute's life, the Gandhis took the message of nonviolence and peace to hundreds of thousands of high school and university youth around the U.S. and much of the Western world. Sunanda and Arun also began the Gandhi Legacy Tour of India, the Gandhi Lifescapes Tour of India, and Gandhi Satyagraha Tour of South Africa. When Sunanda died in February of 2007, the family is working to establish a residential school in the poorest rural India in her honor currently. Arun also founded the Gandhi Worldwide Education Institute, and this institute was founded to promote community building in economically depressed areas of the world through the joining of Gandhian philosophy and vocational education for children and their parents. Arun is also the author of several books, A Patch of White, 2 books on poverty and politics in India, and a compilation of MK Gandhi's wit and wisdom, World Without Violence, Can Gandhi's Vision Become Reality? The Forgotten Woman, the Untold Story of Kastur, The Wife of Mahatma Gandhi, Legacy of Love, My Education in the Path of Nonviolence, and Grandfather Gandhi. He also holds degrees in humanities studies and has been involved in interfaith activities. Arun was elected to the Board of Trustees of the Council for Parliament of World Religions. What an amazing biography. Thank you for coming on the show, and welcome to the show, Arun Gandhi.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. I'm so pleased. Well, we're here talking about well-being because mental health and well-being are the largest public health priority and the largest financial burden, according to the World Health Organization. And issues surrounding well-being and mental health affect people from all walks of life. I think of well-being as when we have kind of a balance and our mind feels calm and our heart beats at a nice even rate and we feel this sense of inner peace. I was wondering, Arun, how would you describe well-being or mental health?
I believe I would describe well-being as just as you said, when you are calm and peaceful and not scrambling around to get things done or to get things to buy, and being satisfied with what you have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's generally, broadly speaking, what I think a person should enjoy.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Well, that's an interesting point too, because so much of our world is focused on materialism or getting things or stuff. So I think what you're describing is
Exactly. We have created a whole society that's based on exploitation and competition. And we are getting deeper and deeper into it. And we'll see today that we are not only exploiting natural resources, but we are also exploiting people mercilessly. And also created a competitive society where we are all scrambling to be better than the other person in terms of material gains.
true.
And that has tension in the world, and tension sometimes erupts in the or protests where cope with the lifestyle, or it affects people personally in the mental sense. The whole system that we have created is a very dangerous and very destructive system.
Right. I agree completely. So you're saying basically if we were less exploitative and less competitive and more unified, that the world would be a more peaceful place. And I completely agree.
We talk about peace and creating peace, but what is peace really? It's not the absence of war. Peace is where we can create harmony in society, among people, and between people and creation. And that kind of harmony we would be able to create only when with what we or where we are, and not be competing with each other. And society accepts you for what you are, and respects you. We have created so many divisions between people, economic divisions, religious divisions, gender divisions, you name it, and we have a division for it. When we divide people, we are creating a wall between them and us. And every time we create a wall between people, we are creating the potential for conflicts.
Sure.
So we have to learn to get rid of all those divisions and start looking at each other as human beings and respect each other as human beings. And I emphasize the word respect because we have programs today to teach young people tolerance, that they have to tolerate diversity, they have to tolerate different people. I don't believe in that. I don't think we need to teach our children to tolerate diversity. We need to respect diversity,
Embrace it. Mm-hmm.
embrace it.
Right.
So
Because, and do you,
it's something that you can't do anything about it, so you just lump it. But
right. People
respect
get
is where
overwhelmed.
you begin to, yeah, yeah. So we need to learn to respect diversity and embrace it.
Do you think that's something that can be done in a short time period, or do you think that will take a long time to cultivate and turn that around?
Well, it's going to take a long time because we have created this very exploitative society over a period of centuries,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not going to turn around overnight.
Mm-hmm.
We can turn ourselves around overnight. And that's why grandfather said that we must be the change we wish to see in the world. that unless we change ourselves, the world is not going to change.
Well,
The tragedy.
I also like what your grandfather said, because he talks about his quest kind of to master anger and violence, and they're so relevant, like you're talking about today, because I think that ties into the divisiveness. And I like
Yeah,
one of the quotes he said: "I've learned through bitter experience the one supreme lesson is to conserve my anger, and as heat conserved is transmuted into energy, even so our anger controlled can be transmuted into power which can move the world." I thought that was a powerful statement about how we kind of transform our feelings of divisiveness or anger toward others into something that's more
yeah.
positive energy for ourselves and others. It kind of reverberates out.
Anger is a gift. He also told me when I was living with him that anger is a gift. It is like electricity. Just as we have a circuit breaker in the electrical circuit, anger is the same kind of circuit breaker in the human being. And just as something goes wrong in the electricity circuit, the circuit breaker cuts the electric flow and tells us that there's something wrong and we need to look at it. In the same way, anger is that circuit breaker that is telling us there's something wrong and we need to stop and look at it.
Right. It's
Unfortunately,
like
we have not learned to teach people about anger. We just allow each person to find their own ways of dealing with it. And the tragedy is that all of us end up abusing anger instead of learning how to use it intelligently. I
That's
wrote a
very
book
true.
on this recently. I wrote a book on this gift of anger, which was published by Simon and Schuster. And it's done very well, got translated into more than 30 languages. And
Is that something you think could be taught
it's
in
all about,
schools?
yeah. Many schools have started teaching that,
I think that more
at
schools need to
least in
focus on
Europe.
kindness and resolving conflict instead of all the educational, pushing all the, intellectual parts, because I think people function better intellectually if they resolve and learn how to manage conflict or anger, and also master kindness. What do you think about that?
I think I've been promoting this idea for a long time in the US, but not many people are willing to accept it because they're so set in their programs. They don't want to change anything or upset anything.
That's true.
Many schools have invited me to come and talk to the kids and all that, but you can't talk once and expect the kid to understand what you're talking about. This
Right.
has to be a form of lesson that goes on day after day, and then the children get into that and learn about it.
Sure. Like
So,
woven like a thread kind of through their learning.
yeah.
Can you explain a little bit, Aaron, how you think, nonviolence concepts relate to well-being? Like how if we have more nonviolence in our life, how that would make us feel better?
Yeah, I think, people have not really understood grandfather's philosophy of nonviolence. They've looked at it only as a means of conflict resolution, that, you can resolve conflicts peacefully. What it really entails, and what if he had lived long enough, he would have taught us those aspects of it, is that nonviolence is a way of life. It's like
So
he
it's
said,
something that you just practice, like you're
nonviolence.
saying, we teach our kids, we incorporate that into the way we talk at school.
We
I
have
just
to
Yeah.
incorporate that in the way we bring up our children, the way we teach our children. Everything has to change. When we threaten our children with punishment if they misbehave, the first seed of violence that we are planting in their minds,
It's
that
true.
they come to believe that anybody who does something wrong must be punished. And so
Yes.
our whole justice system is based on that punishment concept.
That's right. From the time we're children, we
Punishment,
do. We notice that we're taught to look at the world from that lens of our upbringing and our life experiences. It's true. And then we carry that out as adults, right?
right. But justice is not about hurting, it is about healing. And justice system is about hurting people, punishing them. There's no concept of healing in our justice system. And that goes from our homes all the way to the public justice system.
It's true. Well, I think violence and our well-being are really linked, because I feel that people, if they're not feeling peaceful inside and they have violence in their minds and in their homes and in everywhere they go, it just permeates the person. And like you're saying, they just come from this place of kind of isolation and not like creating discussions.
When you live in a culture of violence, where violence has seeped into every aspect of human life. Our language has become violent, our sports is violent, our religion is violent, our politics is violent, economics is violent, everything is violent. And you live in that culture of violence, you are going to be affected by that violent culture. And it's going to affect your mind. You can't live in peace.
Well, it makes your mind violent, don't you think? It kind of sets the stage for how you operate in the world, how you move through the world with others and yourself. It has to come from within first.
Yeah.
But of course, how we teach our kids, children are helpless in some ways because they're relying on the parents. See, what you're saying is you've written a book and you think that it's important for each day for us to, in our education system, to incorporate the theories of nonviolence into our teachings. Because I think that with epigenetics, which is like how violence or other things get passed down from generation to generation, violence definitely has this genetic component where, the child learns from the parent. So it's a complex kind of piece there biologically, because then the person actually gets wired that way. So I think what you're saying makes complete sense, because we have to unwire that, so to speak. I was wondering, Aaron, did your grandfather, Gandhi, did he talk to you about well-being or mental health or those kinds of ideas? Or was it more just an unspoken, like known concept about well-being?
Well, it's an unspoken concept, because the moment you accept nonviolence as a way of life and start living nonviolently, you enjoy well-being automatically.
It's true. Yeah. Right.
Our
Well,
conflicts today are coming from the violence that we live in. Like I said earlier, we have created a whole culture of violence that has overtaken our lives.
mm-hmm.
Right from parenting all the way to end of life, everything is violent.
That's true. Do you think that nature has elements of violence in it? I know, a tree can fall down and that can be violent, but for the most part, a tree is very peaceful. I know that sounds kind of esoteric, but I was just thinking how nature can be also an example of how we should be in a way.
I know there is some violence in human beings that is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Where the fact that we walk around, we are trampling on little life forms all the time. And
Right.
that is violence. But we can't just sit and be in one place without moving. That's not practical. So we have to understand the amount of violence in our life, but we should make an attempt to reduce that violence to the bare minimum and not increase it.
Exactly.
What we have done is we have increased the violence exponentially to an extent that it's now destroyed human life.
What do you think your grandfather would think about what's happening now? Would he be surprised, or would he think that would be a natural evolution, and what do you think about that as well? I mean, just because it picks up momentum instead of it becoming more peaceful in a way, we've now like you're saying, we've gotten to this mode where it's exponentially getting more and more violent. Do you think he would think that that would be something that kind of was expected to happen because of just what was already happening during his time, or do you think that this is something that wasn't inevitable, that we could continue to keep stopping and moving in a different direction?
No, he wasn't. He wouldn't be surprised at all, because the fact that he evolved this philosophy of nonviolence was because he saw the growing violence in human society during his time.
Mm-hmm.
And he realized that this has to change.
Right.
If humanity is to be saved from this kind of violence,
Right.
we have to change. He could come up with was nonviolence. So he evolved this, but he thought that a civilized human society would recognize this and accept it and just start changing. And that would surprise him, that the more civilized we have become, the more violent we are, instead of becoming non-violent and peaceful. So the whole idea of what is civilization, what is the meaning of being civilized, comes into question.
He talked a lot about transformation and being patient too, and like really challenging
Yeah, I mean, he
situations.
said in his concept, civilization is when every individual makes an attempt every day to become better than he or she was the day before.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to be long excellence. Unfortunately, what we think is that education ends when we leave school, university, with a degree, and that's the end of education. And then we spend the rest of our time just to make money and buy things that we love.
So true.
And that's not what life is about. Life, becoming a better human being, contributing to the society in a way that society can improve along with you. And if all of us did that, then we would have a truly civilized society. Today, we think civilization means richness and all the things that we possess. That is civilization. That is not civilization. We are not a civilized nation.
I think a lot of that comes from the media as well, because so many people watch TV and
It's not just the media. You know, when we point a finger at somebody, there are three fingers pointing back to. And we look at ourselves more than we can look at the media. We are not slaves of the media.
right.
The
Well, I think it
media
comes
is
from an
there.
internal place, is
And
what you're saying.
yes, so internally, we don't want to take responsibility to leave it to somebody else to guide us. Every time we face a conflict, we want somebody to come and get us out of that conflict. Why can't we get out of it?
Mm-hmm.
We just have to look for a Gandhi or Jesus to come back and save us.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain a little bit more about Satyagraha, or the search for truth that Gandhi talked about, a bit more to our listeners so that they can maybe understand that? Because I think that's beneficial for people to learn more about, so they can have what you're talking about, manifesting this internal peace and then communal global peace.
Well, he believed in every human being should make an attempt to search for truth. He also realized that truth is not constant. What appears true today will not be true tomorrow. It will change. And we should accept that change. But our attempt should be, in all humility and honesty and sincerity, to find that ultimate truth. We may not find it in all our lifetime. He didn't find it, although he spent his whole life trying to look for it and search for it. He didn't find it.
Mm,
But he made that attempt, and that
right.
is what we all need to do, because in that attempt to find that ultimate truth, we raise ourselves, raise our consciousness, and raise our moral stature to a higher level. So, it benefits us.
How do you think we can apply those principles, like of what you were just talking about, raising consciousness, to our everyday life, to find our truth?
If we are sincere and honest, and if we live with more compassion and love and respect, not just for ourselves, but for all of people around us, we will eventually begin to have that kind of consciousness and understanding. Today we have become, because of the materialistic lifestyle, we have become very selfish and greedy, and we want everything for ourselves. Every time there's a little calamity somewhere, we rush to the stores and buy as much as things that we want and store it up. We don't care about other people as long as we have what we want. And that idea, permeates from childhood, because as parents, we are constantly telling our children that they have to be successful in life and don't worry about anybody else. Just get to the top by any means possible. Now, that is the seeds of selfishness that we are planting in our children. We're making them believe that they don't have to think about anybody else, live for themselves, and that's how this whole concept in the United States has come up, that we are independent individuals and we can do whatever we like and it's nobody's business. Nobody is independent.
Well, it is an act of
violence.
We are all
interdependent and interconnected.
Exactly. Well, I know I think in America, we're very much taught to be independent. Do you think that's a global phenomenon, or do you think that's more predominant in the U.S.?
It's started in the U.S. and now it's becoming global because the U.S. has so much influence around the world. So everybody is copying the U.S. and going in the same direction. Just as every country has accepted materialism as a lifestyle, and everyone is exploiting each other and exploiting nature.
Right. Well, and I know Gandhi spoke about transformation and being patient in the most, provoking situations. And I think that his application of anger management techniques are really effective at dealing with these provoking or threatening situations that people have. But also what you're talking about is how important it is to teach this to our children in our schools and in our homes. And also the idea of us working together as a unified group of people, the human race, toward further understanding about violence and how we can take care of our well-being and being able to discuss our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings. I know you talked about respect, and I do hear my patients talk about my practice about wanting respect. And the way I was always taught was that you really can't demand respect from someone. How do you think you can cultivate respect toward each other? I mean, I know listening to each other, like we're doing, having compassionate conversations, not being so definitive and being more open. How do you think we could also cultivate more respect in our relationships with each other and ourselves?
We have to live respect. We have to command respect. We can't demand it. Today, a lot of people demand respect and, being very aggressive about it. And that's not how you're going to get respect. That is fear. What we are doing today is trying to get respect through fear. And that's not real respect. Respect should come from love, not from fear.
Exactly. Well, it's true when we've cultivated that, the coming from a place of fear instead of coming from a place of love. And I think love really is the answer. But I think we have to love ourselves. And if we're taught this divisive way of relating with other people, then in a way it's hard for us to love ourselves because we might feel, like worthy. What is your work, Arun, in the violence or nonviolence fields taught you about the attitudes that the people hold toward well-being or mental health? Do people talk about well-being or mental health in those fields of nonviolence and violence, or is it kind of like you said before, like an unspoken concept?
Yeah, they do talk about it, but they talk about it in an abstract way. They don't want to change their materialistic lifestyle. They don't want to change their ambitions of reaching the top by any means. As long as we live in that culture of violence, we cannot find peace.
Mm-hmm.
To put it very crudely, I mean, imagine living in a snake pit and wanting to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be safe with snakes crawling around you all the time. So it's the same thing. And in also people talk about wanting personal peace and calm and all those things. But if you are constantly involved in that materialistic pursuit yourself individually, you're not going to find that peace. Then you've got to change your lifestyle. And you got
Exactly.
to stop pursuing material gains.
Right.
Then you will really find peace.
Right. And you were talking also about how after we get done with our degrees or our education, to continue this kind of education, so to speak, throughout the rest of our lives, and to continue to work on
Yeah,
cultivating.
that is where we have to educate ourselves. Nobody is going to educate us. Entire life is education. And we have to be conscious of that and make that personal attempt to continue to improve and continue to transform the knowledge that we acquired through university degrees that becomes a meaningful life.
Mm-hmm. I think people don't see that. They're disillusioned. I was wondering, Aaron, I know we have time just for a couple more questions. I was wondering if there's someone listening who's interested in applying nonviolence in their profession, their workplace from a healthy perspective. Do you have any recommendations from all your years of experience?
Abusing animals and killing animals just for the skin there, and find natural ways of doing it. The most natural way, if you want animal skin, is to get it from the animals that die naturally
Right. It's kind of like
and not
carrying over that
kill
respect
animals.
to animals as well.
Exactly. Respect should not just be for human beings, but for all of creation,
Mm-hmm.
which means animals and nature. We abuse nature all the time. We cut off trees and cut off things all the time because we have the capacity to do that, and we want flowers to decorate our homes.
Right. So we have destructive tendencies that we do just for selfish reasons, like you were saying. And also
Yeah,
it's about cultivating respect for living things, all living things.
exactly. We have gotten into that habit that we are superior human beings and we can do whatever we like and grab whatever we like, and it doesn't matter.
Yes.
That arrogance is going to eventually destroy us. All civilizations in the past have died or by arrogance.
That's true. Yeah, people get carried away with themselves and they lose themselves and they're not tuned into their
Yeah,
own well-being. And then they also, I think they take that out on other people and they think that other people or other things will bring them that
yeah,
peace that like comes from within them. Have you heard, Aaron, of any
right.
campaigns or organizations in the nonviolence community, like such as your own, that work specifically to focus on well-being or or mental health that incorporate those topics? I know that's kind of an unusual question, but I was just curious.
Well, in my work, I have not specifically dealt with that well-being issue, but it's part of the whole thing. If you learn to live non-violently, learn about non-violence, gradually you will enjoy well-being there. So
Right.
I've been doing a lot of work in the prisons here locally, and the prisoners have benefited a lot and they enjoy it very much. And so it brings well-being to them
Mm,
also.
wonderful.
So it's part of the package. I'm not focusing on just well-being,
Right.
but I'm focusing on the whole concept of a nonviolent lifestyle.
I just think people like campaigns or programs, and so I always am thinking of ways that people how they manifest that. And I do think we need more programs like what you're talking about, where we go into different groups and we teach them about nonviolence and peace. And I think that's where violence intersects within our community. And that's why it's so important for us to continue talking about our well-being. I'm just going to ask you maybe one more question. I was wondering Aaron, how do you think we can put more nonviolence into our lives to help to create mental health? And I know you've talked about some of those, but maybe you could encapsulate that for our listeners, how we can put more
Well,
nonviolence.
one of the things that my grandfather taught me was to understand violence if you want to understand nonviolence. And to do that, he made me draw a genealogical tree of violence, with
Hmm.
violence as the main branch, and passive violence and physical violence as the two offsprings. And every day before I went to bed, I had to analyze everything that I had experienced during the day and put them down on that tree. Physical violence is where we use physical force against one another. And that is the kind of violence that we understand because we see it every day. It's all the fighting and killing and beating and murders and rape and all of these physical manifestations of violence.
Mm-hmm.
But passive violence is something that we don't know and we have never thought about. And that is all the kinds of things that we do to one another every day, where we don't use any physical force, but yet we hurt people directly or indirectly.
So taking kind of an
Simple
assessment.
things like
Mhm.
throwing away food,
Throwing away
throwing
food.
away food every day. Looking down on people, discrimination, oppression, hundreds of things that we do every day where we have very wasteful habits. We waste things because we can afford to buy new things. All of these things are passive violence.
Mm-hmm.
Grandfather explained that every day we commit passive violence to people consciously and unconsciously, and that generates anger in the victim, and the victim then resorts to physical violence to get justice. So it is passive violence that fuels the fire of physical violence. So logically, if we want to put out that fire of physical violence, we need a fuel supply. And since the fuel supply comes from each one of us, to be the change we wish to see, we have to individually make that conscious effort to find out how are we contributing to violence, passively or physically, and do that honest introspection. And then once you have it in black and white on the wall, you see all your weaknesses there on the wall, then you can transform those weaknesses into strengths and become a better human being.
I love
But
that.
as long as
Mm-hmm.
we live as long in denial, we are not going to change. We just say we don't need any change, and so we continue to contribute to violence all the time.
Did your grandfather talk about denial? Because I think denial is one of the biggest human conditions. And like you're saying, we have to take this daily inventory and have individual suffering and look at the things that we've carried out that have caused violence as well, like you're talking about with throwing away food or hurting people we live with, or our own ways that we inflict violence. Did he
Yeah.
talk about denial so that people can look at their violent acts or how violence is affecting them?
Yeah, well, that's where the honesty and sincerity come in. Unless we want to
Mm-hmm.
change and become better human beings, we will continue to live in denial. we think that we are doing good, and so it's nobody's business, and we continue to live in a manner that has created such a vast disparity around the world. Today, Europe, they're being affected by all these refugees that are coming into Europe. Because that is the easiest route for all the refugees to come in there. They are coming because they see somebody living a wonderful lifestyle and they don't have any of it. And in their country, because of the poverty and destitution, they have no hope and no opportunities. So they are naturally attracted by those hope and opportunity that they can see on the horizon. And they're going to come for that. That is human nature.
Right. It's complex.
But yeah, but the ideal way of stopping this would be for the affluent nations to get involved in transforming those nations living in poverty and making life better for them. Then, we can have peace and harmony in the world. But if we live with that arrogance that our affluence is our own and we are not going to share it with anybody else, then, we are going to live in fear, live with armies, and the army is not going to be able to protect us all the time. If we go out and destroy parts of the world, that destruction is eventually going to affect us also.
Right. So it comes from within. And I think in our families, our communities, ourselves, and then also how we take care of other nations or other, people on other borders so that we can be more proactive.
I think the worst thing that we have done as a human society is this concept of nationalism. We make such a big deal about being nationalistic and nationalism and patriotic to our country and so on. And we think that we can protect our small part of the world with armed forces and let the rest of the world go down the drain. Well, however rich and powerful we may be, if the rest of the world is going down the drain, we are going down with them.
Yeah, that's another illusion.
It's an illusion. It's a false illusion.
The false illusion. Even if you take physics, I'm sure the particles that are on the opposite side of the world drift over to us, so we're all intertwined. But it's an illusion that we tell ourselves,
exactly.
And it's true. How do we face ourselves, and how do we face our own fears instead of giving that to other people and trying to be controlling of other people? Instead, we need to work together and create supportive environments that empower and care for each individual. I want to thank you, Arun, for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think it's everything you're talking about and we're talking about is essential for our health, for our well-being, for the continuation of our civilization and world in a different way, that I'm trying to envision. And I think our conversation hopefully can help others to lead to more understanding and including and caring. I'm always trying to imagine a world where we can share our thoughts and feelings a little more freely and move toward health for all human beings.
Good.
I think you've helped today with ending negative perceptions about well-being and raising awareness so we can live in a more loving, safe, and accepting world.
Thank you.
I'm so thankful. And if you have questions for either of us, you can write to me on my Facebook page, The Dr. Deborah Show, or if maybe you want to look more at Arun Gandhi's website, it's Arun Gandhi, ArunGandhi, so people can learn more about your work as well. Thank you again.